Hello, how have you been? Are you ready for another intriguing paranormal cold case? To help me, as always, I'm joined by our pair of paranormal pundits. For Team Skeptic, academic and psychologist Dr. Kieran O'Keeffe, and for Team Believer, writer and parapsychologist Evelyn Hollow. Kieran, I am wildly excited about this. It's a case that's pretty different for us. A haunted boat. Can ghosts swim?
I don't know if I could answer that question, but this is a fascinating case, and I think wherever you've got human beings, there's the potential for ghostly experiences, because all you need is witnesses, and the great thing about this case is we have so many witnesses.
Evelyn, it's really exciting to be in a different location. This is not your average haunted house. So, how are you feeling about this? Have you got your sea legs?
Now, contrary to popular belief, goths can swim. But what makes it so different to, say, a haunted house story is that it's set in the sea. People can't just come and go as they please. It's a totally unique set of circumstances. It creates essentially a locked room mystery.
All right, I normally say let's dive in at this point. We're going to take that literally today as we hit the high seas to bring this strange case to life. So, it is 1850, and Captain George Manly Aldridge takes command of a small Royal Navy ship, the HMS Asp. Now, Captain Aldridge is about 35 at this stage, and he's been a sailor since he was 14. He's a brave, level-headed man who is well thought of by his bosses. HMS Asp has a strange reputation, though, from the start. A senior officer tells the captain that the ship is said to be haunted. Now, Aldridge assumes he's joking, but he knows that sailors can be superstitious and doesn't want to encourage any nonsense. So he decides to keep this talk of ghosts to himself. But even without encouragement, the dockyard workers start talking about bad luck and curses. Some won't even board the Asp after dark. It's annoying for Captain Aldridge, but once the Asp leaves the dock, life settles into a daily routine. But it's in the evening that things begin. After dinner, Captain Aldridge likes to sit in his cabin with one of his officers, Master McFarlane, the ship's master, Aldridge's right-hand man, hearing McFarlane read aloud, the Victorian equivalent of a podcast. But on this particular night, suddenly, they hear a sound from next door, an unused room that the crew call the ladies' room. It sounds like someone staggering about drunkenly, knocking into furniture. Master McFarlane stops reading and, assuming one of the sailors has gotten below and is making a nuisance of themselves, shouts at the man to stop. There's no answer, so McFarlane pulls the door open, ready to give the man a stern talking to, but there's no one there. These two cabins are in a part of the ship that only has one entrance. You'd have to walk past the captain's cabin to get to the ladies' room, so Aldridge and McFarlane can't work out how anyone could have got in unseen. And from that point on, they start to hear noises most nights. It becomes almost a joke between them. They say to each other, "It's only the ghost again." When the master is gone, though, Captain Aldridge hears the drawers of his bedside table slide open and shut, and the top of his washstand raise and lower. Sitting alone with his papers, he often hears a sharp noise like an unloaded gun being fired right behind his head. Aldridge wants to find a rational answer, but he just can't explain it. It all comes to a head, though, one night when Aldridge has been on shore visiting a friend. He comes back on board the Asp, and as he reaches his door, he hears someone rush from his cabin into the ladies' room next door. He's so sure of it that he turns to Mr. McFarlane and says, with glee, "Stand still a moment. I think I've caught the ghost." His skeptic spidey senses are on full tingle now. He is convinced that a member of the crew is in there, and he is about to unmask the perpetrator behind all these practical jokes. He takes down the sword that hangs over his bed, gives it to McFarlane, and says, "If anyone attempts to escape, cut him down. I will stand the consequences." Then he goes back to the cabin with a light. He knows no one can have left the room in any other way. He throws open the door and looks around. But the room is entirely empty. Kieran, in Captain Aldridge, we have a witness who is just like you. He's a natural skeptic. What do we know about him?
Well, we know that he was a highly decorated officer in the Navy. He served a long time in the Navy, and he had 5 commendations from the Admiralty, but we've also got an interesting aspect, because all of the details that we've got about this case come directly from him, because he wrote a very long letter, and that letter was then published in the Hampshire newspaper. And within that letter, he talks about being a skeptic, and he even quotes, "Much as I was and am a skeptic in ghost stories, I must confess myself staggered and completely at a loss to account for what actually did occur and never could be accounted for." So he was looking for rational explanations, much as I was, a man after my own heart.
Interesting. We're going to see that again and again throughout this case, I think, as he tries to solve it skeptically and then finds himself rather daunted by what he's witnessing. Evelyn, what do we know about the ship, the HMS Asp?
So at this time, it's a paddle steamer, and by that I mean that it's got two big circular paddles that essentially churn water to propel the ship forward. But before it was used by the Navy, it was actually what's called a packet ship, which basically means that it delivered mail. At that point, it would have sometimes had passengers on board, but this time it's simply the captain and the crew, and there shouldn't be anyone else on board.
So it's not a huge boat.
No, it's not. We're not talking about this being a ship that's got 50 rooms on it. There's not a lot of places to hide.
Kieran, one thing I feel like I've got to bring up here. Sailors are pretty well known for being naturally superstitious. Do we have to bear that in mind when we're looking at the crew and how they react to things?
I think we do, because we've got to remember, where do superstitious beliefs come from? They come from kind of looking at uncertainty, and the sea is kind of an unknown beast. You don't know necessarily what it's going to do from one day to the next, and that's kind of at the basis of these superstitious beliefs for the sailors. But there's a crucial detail here, which is almost me deflecting to Team Believer for a moment, and that is that he will know about the superstitious beliefs of his crew. And what's interesting is he keeps all of this information that he knows about this haunted ship from them. He keeps it secret because he doesn't want to create that panic and that fear on the ship.
Evelyn, do we know why the room next door, the room where they're hearing noises, is called the ladies' room? There's no ladies on board this ship.
No, so they wouldn't typically be on a naval ship. Exceptions were only really made for captains' wives or high-ranking officers' wives. This is obviously a very small crew, but it was previously a packet ship. So when it was delivering mail, it would have sometimes had passengers on it. And all female passengers have to be kept in separate quarters from the males for obvious reasons. And so the cabin that is next to the captain's room was the designated ladies' room.
And what is going on in that room, Kieran? Because Captain Aldridge is hearing all these different noises, things like a gunshot, drawers opening, and that moment where he decides to go and confront the person who's in this room, he's convinced someone's in there because of the amount of noise going on.
Yeah, I think we're placing a lot of weight on Captain Aldridge knowing the sounds of a ship that he is in charge of. And I would say normally that would be the case. But he doesn't have much experience with paddle steamers. And so maybe what we're looking at is his first experience on a paddle steamer. And this is, a ship that has a huge amount of noise on it and would be very different to the other ships he would have been on. So potentially he's misinterpreting some of these noises that are perfectly natural.
Okay, let us hop back on board the Asp, because things are about to get even less shipshape. You see, whatever is going on, it does not stop at noises. One night, the ship is anchored about a mile from shore near Holywell in Wales when a lookout runs from his post in terror, shaking and unable to explain himself properly. When he finally calms down, he tells Captain Aldridge that he saw a woman standing on the paddle box. That's the wooden casing that fits around those big circular paddles that Evelyn was talking about. The woman was standing perfectly still, pointing upwards into the sky. Now, Captain Aldridge is more irritated than afraid. The Asp is in the middle of the ocean. There are no women on board. He orders the man back to his post. But the man is so scared, he actually has a fit and has to be sent to bed. Aldridge takes the rest of the watch himself, but sees nothing. Over the following weeks and months, though, other members of the crew report the same thing. Different men, different watches, but the same description every time. A female figure, always in the same place, always pointing upwards, always silent. The effect on the crew is horribly damaging. Some men refuse to do night duty altogether. A few simply leave the ship, too frightened to stay on board. By now, the story has reached shore, and a clergyman, a man called Mr. Phillips, hears about the unrest on board and suggests that he could question the men and get to the bottom of it. Captain Aldridge feels like he is in danger now of losing control of the ship as panic sets in. Morale is at rock bottom. He can't afford to lose any more crew, so he agrees. Mr. Phillips seems to be a serious man who talks to the crew in a calm fashion, then comes to Captain Aldridge with a deeply unsettling revelation. Mr. Phillips has been told that before the Royal Navy named it HMS Asp, the ship was called the Fury, and it used to carry paying passengers. On one of its last runs, a stewardess was sent to clear the first-class cabins, where she made a grim discovery. Lying on one of the berths, she found the body of a young woman, her throat cut. That room, it turns out, is what Captain Aldridge now calls the ladies' room. Jeepers creepers, Kieran, we are in the middle of the Irish Sea. There are no women on board. Who are the crew seeing?
That's a tough one as a skeptic to answer, because you do have a lot of witnesses. What do they see? Maybe they're seeing something that they desire and they're not going to have for a long time.
No, what?
Maybe...
You think this is an example of sailors fantasizing about
maybe
a woman?
it's some form of wishful thinking. You know, all you need is one of them to misinterpret something and think that they've seen a woman, and suddenly now their imagination is running wild.
Evelyn, I can see you looking entirely disapproving in that conversation. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it's a really odd one, because so is it that they're seeing something, but one of them mistakes it for being a woman? It's very distinct though. She's pointing to the sky. She's not just standing there. And then that spreads throughout the crew. But then every single person, as they go up on watch at night, would have to see the exact same thing, bearing in mind that the ship is moving around. That means the horizon is different, the land is different, the weather is different, and you're outside. So different light conditions, different things that they could mistake. And then what, every single one of them sees the exact same woman, all pointing at the sky. Also, for these people, this is their life, right? This is what they do all the time. They're all fishermen, they're all seamen, they've all done this before. This is their job. If they don't do their job, they don't get paid. They don't get paid, they've probably got starving kids and a really angry wife at home. You do not want to get to port and have people saying, oh, so-and-so over there, yeah, don't hire him, mate, he's crazy, he sees phantoms on ships. You will not get hired on the next boat. So I think they take it fairly seriously that they are seeing something.
It's a powder keg of emotion right now on this ship, isn't it? People are frightened, people are scared, and cooped up on a ship, that has real implications, real impact. Do you think, Kieran, that so many people seeing something like this does make a strong case that it is real?
It does make a strong case, but there's a number of different factors here at play, which are possible factors. We don't know, but during the 1850s, that mid-1800 period, there still would have been ships where the crew would have suffered from any number of different illnesses. Cholera, for example, scurvy. The second one is, of course, contagion. You know, this possibility that you've got thoughts, feelings, behaviours that are spread amongst a group of people. And what's crucial about this environment is it is a very closed, contained environment. And if anything, that exacerbates the effects of contagion.
Sorry, I'm just checking the symptoms of scurvy, and it does say seeing ghost women actually pointing in the sky.
Really?
It does.
Scurvy in the Irish Sea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What do we make of Mr. Phillips coming in and his assertion that the ghost is this murdered woman in that cabin, in cabin 15? We love our ghost stories to have this little neat, tied up little bit of real life history behind them. But is it too perfect?
So we do know that there is obviously a ladies' cabin on it. We do know that previously it did have passengers at one point. The difficulty is that there's no record of anyone being murdered or found dead or otherwise in that cabin. Now, that's not to say that it didn't happen. There's a variety of reasons why that might not have been reported. In fact, the captain himself, in his letter that he wrote for the newspaper, he believed that it was essentially hushed up and that the ship was then shoved back out into the waters. But with no records and no name, it's very hard for me to track someone down.
Kieran, we've got tough sailors here, fainting from fear. Surely something is going on here. They're not just imagining it.
No, but then again, fear is a factor here, and it's a huge factor. Fear is a factor in a situation where they cannot escape. They're in the middle of the sea. They think that they're being played by a ghost and all of the other phenomena associated with it. So the fact that they're tough sailors is neither here nor there. Any human being that experiences extreme fear has that potential for fainting and for any other symptoms that can result.
All right, really interesting. And I would love to hear your thoughts about what you think is going on board HMS Asp. There is undoubtedly some spooky shizzle going on this ship right now, and it is about to get even spookier. But Captain Aldridge, ever the skeptic, refuses to believe that the strange activity is the ghost of the murdered woman. He still holds on to his hope that the phenomena has an entirely rational cause, even if he hasn't found it yet. When he lies in bed at night, he tries to figure it out, still certain that a human is behind this, and he can catch them out. So, he hatches a plan with Master McFarlane, his most trusted officer. If at any time Captain Aldridge hears something, he will pull the bell rope above his head to summon help. Aldridge is absolutely convinced that this detective work will eventually turn up a human culprit. But then, one night, he wakes not to a sound, but to a sensation so odd, it snapped him instantly wide awake. There is a hand resting on his leg. He lies still, not out of fear, but because he wants to be certain he's not mistaken. Then, with a sudden movement, he reaches down to grab the hand while simultaneously using his other hand to pull the bell. The quartermaster comes running quickly with a light, but there is no one there. In fact, there is no sign of anyone having been in the captain's cabin at all. But it happens again on another night, only now the hand is on Captain Aldridge's forehead. For a moment, he lies frozen, feeling every hair on his head standing on end. When he finally moves, he throws himself up out of the bed and searches the cabin. But again, there is nothing in the room that could explain what has happened. Captain Aldridge knows that people will assume it was rats or mice, but he is absolutely certain it wasn't. He spent many years on boats. It's safe to say he knows what a rat looks like. He comes to one unavoidable conclusion. There is something on board this ship, and terrifyingly for a skeptic like him, it appears to be able to do the seemingly impossible. Kieran, this is a frightening moment for Captain Aldridge. He is a hardcore skeptic, like your good self. He cannot explain this. Can you imagine how that feels?
I can, in that it would be incredibly frustrating. You know, here he is, a real hardcore skeptic, and suddenly now he's in a scenario where he just cannot explain it.
Have you ever had a moment in your career where you were stumped, when you felt rattled, where you felt maybe that you were on the verge of being turned?
Yes, I guess there is one key moment, and it has parallels to this case. And that is an investigation that I did of SS Great Britain, this huge steamship. And I did an investigation there, a ghost investigation, and went down into the lower class accommodation by myself to investigate, walked into that area, and I felt spooked. I wish there was a better word for it, but there isn't. I just felt spooked, and for about 10 minutes, just walking around the lower class accommodation, I could not find an explanation for why I felt spooked. My wife thinks it's because it was the lower class accommodation, but for me, it's like Captain Aldridge. I was a skeptic, and I still am a skeptic, but I was frustrated because I couldn't find a rational explanation for my experience.
Wow, and imagine taking that feeling, bottling it, distilling it, and putting it in the middle of the Irish Sea. This is a frightening situation, and it's a progression, Evelyn, isn't it? We've had noises, we've had that potential apparition, now we've got physical interaction.
Yeah, I think we've hit a breaking point for the captain, because it's one thing to be constantly hearing odd things, and then you have people on a ship seeing this ghostly apparition to the point where they're asking for their papers to leave. There's people actually just going AWOL off the ship. He's down to a skeleton crew. It's really, really serious. And then he has to lie in bed at night and feel something touching him.
Nobody wants to be groped by a ghost.
Most people don't want to be groped by a ghost. I think the difficult thing for the captain is that that's very hard to ignore. You can explain away noises. You can explain away the men telling themselves ghost stories, being frightened. It's very hard to explain away lying in bed and feeling something physically touch you.
It is a boatload of phenomena. Who is stroking the captain? Is it a particularly able seaman, or is it that female apparition? Let me know your thoughts. How would you explain this? Have you ever had a weird experience at sea? Let me know all of your thoughts, feelings, questions, and comments on the case. And if you're feeling team believer or team skeptic. Now, incredibly, we know from the letter that Captain Aldridge wrote that the strange activity on board continues for 7 years, until eventually the Asp is brought into Pembroke dockyard for repairs. and secured alongside the wall to allow the dock workers safe access. And that first night in dock, it begins again. There are sentries posted along the dockyard wall and around the ship. That's not unusual. This is an expensive Royal Navy asset that needs to be protected. The men hold positions, muskets at the ready, but expect nothing more than another quiet night's watch over a tired old vessel. But in the darkness, they see a figure on board. It seems to be a woman, standing silent and not moving. No one should be on board at all. Then, to the disbelief of those watching, she is suddenly on the dockside. It's like she has stepped off the ship without moving at all. She walks towards the sentries slowly and silently. One of the men calls out to her, ordering her to stop. There's no answer. He calls again, louder this time, warning her he will fire if she doesn't stop. But she keeps coming. In panic and confusion, the sentry raises his musket and cocks it. He calls out once more, "Who goes there?" But the figure does not even look at him. She's almost on top of him now. He can't decide what to do. Should he shoot this woman? It seems wrong. And then, unbelievably, she walks straight through the gun itself. The man drops his musket and runs. The second sentry fires his gun. The shot passes through the woman as if there was nothing there. The sentry watches this strange figure continue across the dockyard with a calm, steady purpose. It's like she knows where she is going. She makes her way out of the dock and towards the nearby churchyard of Pater Old Church. There, she climbs up onto one of the stone graves, and as on the ship, she stands perfectly still, her arm raised, finger pointing upwards into the sky. And then she simply fades away. Evelyn, it's the perfect ending to a ghost story. A restless spirit finally finds peace in a graveyard. But is it too perfect an ending? And also, why would a ghost need a boat to find its way to land?
If we don't know what a ghost is composed of at a molecular or cellular level, we don't know what governs it. Classical physics, quantum physics, does it behave like us? Do you know, we're asking what feels like a really silly question, but it gets to the heart of the science of this type of phenomena. Do you know, why did it have to wait until the ship docked to leave? However, I did dig through some of the records for the port because I was interested in the story about there being sentries and about her going into a graveyard. I wanted to know which graveyard. They describe, if you go through the records back into the early 1800s, down a little street, there was a very old cemetery that's the closest one to the dockyard, and it had a crumbling little chapel in the middle of it. It matches the description that they give, but the names do match, and there's a description for that.
Okay, we got that graveyard just there. Did she really make her way to the graveyard? Kieran, certainly whatever she's doing, she's making her way through a solid metal object, it seems, and also through bullets she's being shot at, and it's having no impact on her at all. Surely this is a ghost.
If it's a visual hallucination and you shoot at it, that bullet is going to go straight through it. It doesn't have to be a ghost because the bullet goes through it.
What is going on here? What are these sentries witnessing?
Well, I think the difficulty, and you know, we're at the end point of the case, and I think this is probably one of the most difficult points for me, because even though I talked about contagion earlier on with this huge group on that ship and the potential for them kind of spreading the idea that there's a ghost there, but it not being an actual ghost, here we've got two sentries. These are individuals who their sole role in life is to actually protect whatever they're protecting, but ultimately they're security minded. If they see a figure that's in a place that shouldn't be there, they react. And that's what they do. Both of them react in that particular way, and one of them shoots at it. So it's a real head-scratching moment for a skeptic, unless I say that they have some shared hallucination. But it seems quite extreme in terms of how one of them reacts and then the other one shoots. It's a very difficult moment.
Evelyn, we have heard the evidence. Have we just witnessed a ghost on a boat?
I think they had to have seen something. I don't think this is a case of people magically getting scurvy in the middle of the Irish Sea. I don't think it's a case of complete contagion. It certainly could have gotten out of control, but I don't think that's the origin point. And I think the captain is one of the most respectable witnesses we've ever had, who went on to have a tremendous career even after this incident. But the difficulty lies in that the sole teller of the story to us is that captain. I'm really kind of hoping that there's someone out there who can give us more information, give us more of the story.
All right, thank you both so much. What would Captain Aldridge make of us sitting here discussing his story? What do you make of it? Uncanny community. Maybe somebody who is listening to this right now has some information about who that mysterious woman could be. I would love to know more. Get in touch. You can email me, uncanny@bbc.co.uk, or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. Next time on Uncanny Cold Cases, we have something really quite peculiar for you on the streets of Victorian London. The infamous Spring-Heeled Jack. But is he an urban legend, a human hoax, or a genuine supernatural triple threat?
They encounter the victim and he points out this weird vampire. The police chase after this assailant and the individual jumps over a 10-foot high fence.
I think there are people at the heart of this case, but I think they are people that are so evil and are so interested in fear and power that they become supernatural themselves.
See you next time. Sleep well. Don't have nightmares. Uncanny Cold Cases was presented by me, Danny Robbins, with Evelyn Hollow and Kieran O'Keeffe. Our theme tune is by Catherine Priddy. The story sections were written by Victoria Lloyd, and it was produced by Simon Barnard and Victoria Lloyd. Our editor and sound designer is Charlie Brandon King, and incidental music is composed by Evelyn Sykes. This is a Bafflegab and Uncanny Media production for BBC Radio 4 and BBC Sounds.